The HOA president stormed onto my ranch, rattling off nonsense about my new fence being some kind of federal crime, acting like she was dialing 911 to unleash a SWAT team over a bad haircut. My land lies far beyond her HOA's reach, and even the trees seemed to chuckle at her live-streamed meltdown as she was flailing like a T-Rex caught in a tornado. She slapped a "remove fence" sign on my gate, whining it was uglier than her last disastrous potluck dish. Not a chance I'm backing down. Grandpa's legacy isn't something she can just erase. Drop a comment below. What's the wildest neighbor drama you've ever dodged? Got any crazy HOA horror stories? Because this showdown is just heating up, and her tantrums are about to crash harder than her dreams of neighborhood rule. It all kicked off one Tuesday morning in October, right after I hammered in the final post of my new wooden fence around my 5-acre property. The fence wasn't flashy, just sturdy cedar planks, standing about 6 feet tall, designed to keep my 3 horses safe and give them proper boundaries. I'd been planning this for months, saving every penny from my paycheck until I had enough to do it right. The morning sun stretched long shadows across the ranch as I stepped back, wiping sweat off my brow with the sleeve of my flannel shirt. 8 years as a county sheriff had taught me the importance of preparation and precision, and this fence was built to last for decades. Then came a sharp rap on my front door. Not a polite knock, but one of those pounding hits that makes you think someone's house is on fire. I crossed my gravel driveway, boots scrunching on the stones, and opened the door to find Scylla standing there, finger jabbed straight into my chest, eyes blazing with fury. She wore one of her trademark bright floral dresses and oversized jewelry that caught the sunlight like flashing warning signs. "Evan Turner," she declared, pointing that manicured finger, "that fence is an absolute eyesore. It's ruining the entire neighborhood's look. I demand you take it down immediately." I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, keeping my voice steady despite the irritation building in my chest. "Morning to you too, Scylla. The fence is on my property, which, as you know perfectly well, lies outside your HOA boundaries. I double-checked the property lines before I started building." She let out a dramatic huff, flipping her hair back in that way she always did when things didn't go her way. "That doesn't matter. Your ugly fence is visible from the street, and it's tanking property values for everyone in Meadowbrook Estates. As president of the HOA, I have the authority to demand its removal." I couldn't help but grin. Ella Montgomery had crowned herself queen of our little suburban kingdom for 3 years now, ever since her messy divorce left her with way too much time and a desperate need to control everyone and everything around her. Right then, my neighbor Dean Phillips rolled out of his garage across the street, wiping his hands on a greasy rag. Dean ran the local auto repair shop and had been fighting Scylla's ridiculous HOA rules for years. Everything from parking his work truck in his own driveway to painting his shutters the wrong shade of blue. He spotted Isla on my porch and called out with a grin, "Hey Evan, is the neighborhood dictator giving you trouble over your beautiful new fence?" Isla whipped around, face flushing bright red. "Dean Phillips, this doesn't concern you. Mind your own business for once." Dean just laughed and gave me a knowing wink. "Isla's on one again, buddy. You better grab some popcorn." Things escalated fast. Within the hour, Isla nailed a "remove fence" sign to my gate, calling it a neighborhood crime. She even included photos taken from dramatic angles to make it look bigger and worse than it really was. Dean texted me a photo with the message, "You've gotta see this drama queen in action." Reading her handwritten demands and outright lies made my jaw tighten. She called my fence everything from an aggressive barrier to a symbol of antisocial behavior. But Isla wasn't finished. By noon, she was live streaming, calling my fence a community curse, her phone shaking with rage. I watched from my kitchen window as she gestured wildly at my fence, her voice carrying across my yard even through closed windows. "This is what happens when people think they're above community standards," she told her phone camera. "Evan Turner built this monstrosity without any thought to how it affects the rest of us. This fence is nothing short of a crime against our beautiful neighborhood." I shook my head and muttered, "Isla thinks she's queen here, but queens don't go around tearing down other people's fences." That evening, I double-checked my property survey and building permits one last time, confirming exactly what I'd known all along. My ranch sits on land that has never been part of Meadowbrook Estates HOA, and every board and nail in that fence is completely legal. I even pulled up the original subdivision maps from 1978 to be sure. A small smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. Isla had picked a fight with the wrong guy, but she had no idea yet. As the sun set, I ran my hand along the smooth cedar planks and made my decision. If Isla Montgomery wanted to start a game, I was more than ready to play. The next morning, I set up a small security camera system around the property, cleverly hiding the cameras among the trees and fence posts. If Scylla was going to keep spreading false accusations and staging her little theatrics, I wanted everything caught on tape. As I adjusted the last camera's angle, Dean showed up, carrying 2 steaming cups of coffee. "Expecting trouble?" he asked, handing me a mug. I took a sip and nodded toward Isla's house where she was visible through the front window, probably plotting her next move. "She wants to play, Dean. I'm just making sure I'm ready when she does." Finishing my coffee, I traced the lines of Grandpa's original fence sketch, silently vowing to protect his dream from her nonsense. This had become about more than just property lines. It was about standing up to bullies who think they can intimidate anyone into submission. Isa had no clue what she was up against, but she was about to learn that some fences are worth defending. That afternoon, Isa's letter arrived, demanding I demolish my fence by dawn or face a lawsuit. The letter reeked of desperation, probably her last-ditch effort to save face after her divorce. I gripped Grandpa's old photo tightly, his smile fueling my resolve to defend this land. Dean swung by later, chuckling. "She's desperate, her whole throne's crumbling." I nodded, hard, heavy but resolute. That evening was the monthly Meadowbrook Estates home meeting, held at the community center next to the subdivision's main entrance. Normally, I wouldn't attend since I wasn't a member, but Isa's campaign against my fence had stirred enough neighbors to raise questions. I decided to show up and set the record straight. The room buzzed with about 30 neighbors drawn in by Isa's fence drama. She slammed photos of my fence onto the projector, snarling, "It's an eyesore." I stepped forward, survey documents in hand, my heart pounding for Grandpa's legacy. "This land is mine." "Check the law." Her smug grin faltered. The room fell silent as I pulled out my folder of papers. "The letter demanding I remove this fence has no legal standing. It's harassment based on a false claim of authority." Isa sprang to her feet, her voice rising nearly to a shout. "That's ridiculous. Your fence impacts the entire community, regardless of some technicality about boundaries. We have the right to protect our property values from your selfish decisions." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I caught doubtful glances between Isa and me. Sophie Turner was frantically flipping through papers, clearly hunting for anything to back up Isla's claims. Waiting for the room to quiet, I smiled and said, "Feel free to have your attorney review these documents. You'll find property lines aren't just technicalities, they're the law." From there, the meeting unraveled. Isa grew more agitated as neighbors asked pointed questions about the HOA's real authority. I left feeling satisfied that I'd sown seeds of doubt about Isa's credibility, but I knew she wouldn't quit easily. Sure enough, the next morning, I woke up to find fresh damage along my fence. My cameras caught Isa's truck scraping a fence post, tires screeching as she sped away. The damage wasn't severe, but it was clearly intentional. I walked the perimeter, inspecting every post and board, noticing tire tracks in the soft dirt where the damage was worst. Checking the security footage was the jackpot. At 2:30 a.m., the truck was seen backing up and deliberately scraping my fence before driving off. The license plate was clear, the same truck parked in Isa's driveway earlier that week. I backed up the video files and called Dean over. "Well, would you look at that?" Dean said, whistling as we watched the replay. "She's graduated from yelling to actual property damage." "That's a felony, isn't it?" I nodded, jaw tightening. "At minimum, it was destruction of property." But I decided to let her dig her own hole a bit deeper before making my move. Instead of confronting Isa right away, I set up more cameras and installed a motion-activated warning system. Small red LED lights were positioned throughout the trees around my fence, programmed to flash rapidly whenever the sensors detected movement after dark. The lights weren't bright enough to disturb anyone, but definitely enough to catch the attention of anyone skulking around at night. The system also sent alerts directly to my phone whenever triggered. Dean helped me test it after sunset. We both grinned as the red lights blinked like angry eyes in the darkness. The next day, I uploaded a video of the home meeting to the neighborhood chat group, focusing on the part where I presented my property documentation proving the fence was legal. I titled it "Setting the Record Straight About Property Rights" and added a brief explanation of what really happened. But I still had another card to play. I anonymously sent the truck damage video to Sophie, hoping to stir her doubts. The response was instant and divided. Some neighbors apologized for believing Ice's version, while others doubled down in support of her. One comment caught my eye from Sophie Turner. Sophie's comment brought some much-needed clarity to the situation. "I think there's been some misunderstandings here," she wrote. "That was the first crack in Isla's support base, and I filed it away for later." Ice's response came that very afternoon. Another video post. This time, she stood in front of my fence looking upset, playing the victim. Despite what some are saying, she told her camera, "This isn't about technicalities or property lines. It's about being a good neighbor and caring for our community." When someone puts up a barrier like this, they're sending a message that they don't want to be part of the Meadowbrook Estates family. I watched the video from my kitchen window, noting how carefully she positioned herself to make my fence look as daunting as possible in the background. When she finished recording, I stepped out onto my porch and called out, "Keep filming, Isa. You are going to need that footage to apologize later." Dean winked at me. "Her drama's our ticket." Fence fights brewing. I couldn't have agreed more. Every move Isa made was giving me more ammunition for the reckoning heading her way. 3 nights after the truck incident, my motion sensors triggered at 1:15 a.m. The alerts buzzing on my phone yanked me from a deep sleep. I quickly accessed the camera feeds from my bedroom. The night vision cameras showed Isa's voice crackling over a speakerphone, pleading with hired thugs. "Break it." My reputation's on the line. My chest tightened at the thought of Grandpa's fence in ruins. I grabbed my phone and started filming from the dark. The red warning lights flashed frantically as the motion sensors tracked the intruder's movements, but Isa seemed determined to push ahead, ignoring the clear signs they were being watched. Through the cameras, I saw her pointing to a specific section of fence near my horse's favorite grazing spot, giving detailed instructions to the men. The audio was clear enough to hear her directing them to make it look like storm damage and to avoid touching the posts, just the boards. These weren't random vandals. This was a coordinated attack, and Isa was the mastermind. What happened next was like watching a crime unfold in slow motion. 2 men systematically pried off 8 fence boards, snapping some in half and tossing others into the pasture where my horses could have been hurt. They worked quietly but efficiently, clearly experienced in this kind of destruction. My fist clenched. Thunder, my horse, nearly stumbled on the jagged boards. Isa paced nearby, texting frantically, oblivious that my cameras caught every move. I bolted outside, chasing their van's tail lights, heart racing as I nearly caught them red-handed. The whole operation took about 20 minutes. When they left, a gaping hole big enough for a car yawned in my fence. I stayed at my window another hour, making sure they didn't return and checking on my horses, who had wandered over to investigate the noise. The next morning, before sunrise, I called Dean to update him. He showed up with coffee and donuts, shaking his head as he surveyed the damage. "She's completely lost it," he said, eyeing the broken boards scattered in the pasture. "This isn't just harassment anymore, Evan. This is serious property destruction." I nodded grimly, but inside, I felt a surge of satisfaction. Isa had just handed me enough evidence to end her HOA presidency and maybe land her in jail. Instead of calling the police right away, I decided to let Isa think she'd gotten away with it. I spent the morning documenting the damage with photos and gathering the broken fence boards, careful to preserve any fingerprints or evidence. Then I called my deputy, Miles Griffin, and asked him to drop by during his lunch break for an unofficial consultation. Miles was 30, sharp as a tack, and had been working under my supervision for 3 years. When he saw the surveillance footage, he let out a low whistle. "Boss, this is ironclad evidence of criminal mischief and conspiracy to commit property damage." You could have all three arrested today. I smiled and told him to keep the footage secure but hold off on arrests for now. That afternoon, Isa posted a message, Evan's fence collapsed, endangering kids. Sophie called it vandalism. Her message read, as predicted, the aggressive barrier Evan Turner erected is already showing structural failure. This morning, a section collapsed, creating a safety hazard for children and pets. The photos showed the gap from angles that carefully hid the broken boards tossed in my pasture. Several neighbors expressed concern about the fence's structural failure, and a few even suggested I should have listened to Isa's warnings from the start. But not everyone bought Isa's story. Sophie Turner posted a comment that caught my attention. At 15:06, Sophie posted, I drove past Evan's property this morning and saw broken boards tossed into his pasture. That doesn't look like structural failure, it looks like vandalism. Within minutes, Isla deleted Sophie's comment and fired back with a claim that the wind must have blown the debris around after the fence collapsed. Dean couldn't resist chiming in, funny how the wind can line up fence boards perfectly and snap them clean in half. Mother Nature must be getting stronger these days. The comment thread quickly became a battlefield, with neighbors taking sides and demanding answers. That evening, Sophie confessed something that caught me off guard. Her eyes filled with guilt as she said, Evan, I need to tell you something. She glanced around nervously, as if afraid of being overheard. Isa asked me to back up her story about your fence collapsing naturally. But I can't do it. I saw those men at your property last night. I was up with my sick grandson and happened to look out the window when I saw the flashlights. This was exactly the break I'd hoped for, an eyewitness to corroborate my camera footage. I invited Sophie inside and showed her a carefully edited clip of the surveillance footage, just enough to confirm what she had already seen. Her eyes widened as she watched Isa directing the destruction. I can't believe she'd stoop this low, Sophie said, shaking her head. She's been getting more controlling lately, but this is criminal. I asked if she'd be willing to provide a written statement, and she agreed immediately. After Sophie left, I spent the evening reviewing all the footage and preparing my evidence package, clear video of the vandalism, photos of the damage, an eyewitness statement, and documentation proving my fence was legal. I still felt the fire of #fence freedom burning in my mind, replaying the image of nearly catching those vandals red-handed. Isa had handed me everything I needed to destroy her credibility and maybe end her HOA reign, but I decided to wait. The trap was set, all I had to do was let her walk right into it. The next morning brought an unexpected development. At 7:30, my phone rang. It was the county dispatch center. Sheriff Turner, we've received a 911 call reporting threats and intimidation at your home. I thanked the dispatcher and told them I'd be home all morning, then immediately called Miles to take over the call. Miles showed up stifling a grin. Isa's 911 call claims you slashed her tires, he said, voice dripping with post-divorce paranoia. I clenched my jaw, Grandpa's fence sketch flashing through my mind. Her lies won't break me. Let me guess, I said. Caller was Isla Montgomery. She wants you to tear down your fence. Miles nodded with a grin. She actually suggested that. Sheriff, I told her I'd investigate thoroughly. We spent 20 minutes going through the motions of an official report. I showed him my property documents again. What I didn't tell Miles was that I planned to use Isa's false report as bait. After he left, I walked over to Isa's house and knocked. She answered quickly, a smug smile spreading across her face. Well, Evan, she said, I hope you've learned actions have consequences. I let my shoulders slump, putting on my most defeated expression. Bowing to her, I promised to dismantle the fence within 3 days. She beamed. I'm glad you're finally being reasonable. What exactly are you proposing? I glanced around, as if checking no one was listening. I'll start tearing it down this weekend. It'll be gone by next Friday. The lie tasted bitter, but Isa had to believe she'd won. Very wise, she said, dripping with condescension. As soon as I got home, I called Dean to fill him in on my fake surrender. You're setting her up for something big, aren't you? He asked. I confirmed his suspicions and asked him to play along. This is going to be beautiful to watch, Dean chuckled. That afternoon, Isa posted a victory message, I'm pleased to announce the fence situation is resolved. Evan Turner has agreed to remove the structure, showing the importance of working together to maintain our standards. Reactions were mixed. Some neighbors congratulated Isa, others were disappointed I was giving in. I resisted the urge to comment, knowing my silence would make the eventual reveal more dramatic, but I wasn't sitting still. I anonymously leaked the vandalism video to the local news, captioned "Ho Tyrant Caught." The footage was explosive via clear proof of Isa orchestrating property destruction while lying to the community. The news station promised to run the story within 24 hours, a perfect timing for my big reveal. That evening, Isa recorded another self-righteous speech in front of my fence. Sometimes it takes persistence and courage to stand up for what's right, she told her audience. This fence will be gone soon, and our neighborhood will be beautiful again. I watched from my kitchen window, wondering how she'd react when the truth came out. Meanwhile, Sophie warned me, Isa was already planning a fence demolition. At 20:09, Sophie warned me, Isa's planning a party. She wants to invite the whole neighborhood to watch you tear down the fence. I told her it sounded mean-spirited, but she insisted. This was perfect. Isa was setting herself up for the biggest public humiliation imaginable. I texted back, let her plan whatever she wants. I have a feeling the party won't go the way she expects. I smirked, knowing her victory laps were about to come crashing down. The trap was set, the bait was taken. Isa thought she'd won but she had no idea her celebration was about to become the most embarrassing moment of her life. Saturday morning arrived with crisp autumn air, the kind that makes you want to spend the day outside. Apparently, half the neighborhood had the same idea. By 9 o'clock, I counted at least 15 people gathered on the sidewalk in front of my property. Some held coffee cups, others carried folding chairs, all clearly there to watch me start tearing down my fence. Isa stood at the center of the group like a queen holding court, wearing a bright yellow sundress and a smile that could light up the whole street. She kept checking her phone and glancing at her watch, clearly expecting me to come out wielding a sledgehammer and begin the demolition she'd orchestrated. Instead, I walked out carrying a laptop and a portable speaker, setting them up on a small table I'd placed on my front porch. The excited chatter died as the crowd realized I wasn't holding any demolition tools. Isa's smile faltered, and she called out, Evan, shouldn't you be getting started? It's going to take all weekend to remove that fence properly. I nodded and smiled back. Oh, I'm definitely getting started, Isa, but first, I want everyone to see exactly how we got here. I prepared a little presentation that I think you'll all find very educational. I opened my laptop, connected it to the speaker, and addressed the crowd. Before I make any changes to my property, I began, I want to make sure everyone understands the full story. Over the past 2 weeks, there have been many accusations and misunderstandings. I think it's time to clear the air with actual facts. Isa's face turned pale as she started moving toward the front of the crowd. That's really not necessary, Evan. We've already resolved this. Let's just move forward with removing the fence as you agreed. But I was already clicking play on the first video file. The footage showed Isa's vandalism plot. Neighbors gasped as they heard her giving instructions to make the damage look like storm destruction. The timestamp proved it happened just days before her claim of structural failure. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. This is doctored, Isa shouted, panic creeping into her voice. He's manipulated this video to make me look bad. Anyone can fake footage with the right software. Interesting theory, Isa, I said calmly. But I have more evidence. I played the next clip, her first live stream session where she called my fence a crime against the neighborhood. Then footage of her coaching the men on how to break boards without leaving tool marks. After that, an email she'd sent to neighbors with dramatically angled photos, making the fence appear more imposing than it was. With each new piece of evidence, murmurs grew louder. Neighbors exchanged looks of disbelief and anger directed at Isa. Ladies and gentlemen, I continued, what you've just seen is a coordinated campaign of harassment, property destruction, and fraud, all because I built a legal fence on my own land, visible from the street. I pulled out a folder containing my property surveys and building permits. Every board of this fence sits on my property, which has never been part of the Meadowbrook Estates HOA. Isa Montgomery has spent 2 weeks lying to all of you about my rights, my property, and my actions culminating in hiring people to destroy my fence, then claiming it collapsed naturally. Sophie shouted. Isa even threatened my garden to lie for her. The crowd erupted in angry voices, neighbors shouting questions and demanding explanations. Dean, who had been watching from across the street, walked over with a huge grin and started clapping slowly. Isa tried one last desperate attempt to save face. "This is all a misunderstanding," she shouted over the noise. "Even if there were problems with how this was handled, the real issue is the fence. It's still an eyesore and hurting property values." But her voice was shaking, and she kept glancing around as if searching for an escape. That's when I played my final card. "Actually, Isa, let me share one more video," I said. This footage was from the previous evening, showing Isa walking around my fence with a measuring tape, taking celebratory photos next to the structure she claimed was so offensive, clearly planning her victory party. The crowd's mood shifted from confusion to outright hostility. Isa grabbed the speaker, yelling, "The fence is still ugly." Before Isa fled, her voice drowned out by the neighbors' angry shouts. "You lied to all of us." One neighbor yelled. "We trusted you to represent our interests, not harass innocent people," called another. "How many other times have you abused your authority like this?" demanded a third. Completely overwhelmed, Isa's face streamed with tears as she struggled to answer the relentless accusations. As she stomped away toward her house, the remaining neighbors came over with apologies and offers to help fix the damage she'd caused. Within an hour, I had more volunteers than I could handle, people bringing tools, replacement boards, and even cases of beer to fuel the repair party. Dean took charge, organizing the effort like a military operation, assigning neighbors to specific tasks, and making sure we had every material needed. "This," he declared, "is what real community looks like, neighbors helping neighbors, not one person trying to control everyone else." By dusk, the fence was rebuilt, even better than before. The neighbors insisted on using premium cedar boards and adding decorative post caps, turning my one simple livestock barrier into something that looked like it belonged in a home and garden magazine. As we cleaned up and shared the last of the beer, several neighbors mentioned plans to call a special home meeting to remove Isa from her position. "She's lost all credibility," Sophie said firmly. "After today, I don't think anyone will trust her judgment again." I raised a glass. "I say this fence is freedom, may try breaking it now." The crowd cheered, and I knew Isa's reign of terror was finally over. My fence stood stronger than ever, both literally and symbolically a victory of truth over tyranny. Sunday morning brought an unexpected escalation I should have seen coming but didn't. I was feeding my horses when my phone buzzed with notifications from the neighborhood chat group. Isa had posted a new video recorded at 6 a.m. in her kitchen, still in pajamas and a bathrobe. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup smeared from crying, and her voice was hoarse as she spoke directly into the phone. "I want everyone to know what kind of person Evan Turner really is," she began, her words slurring slightly, as if she'd been drinking. "Yesterday's display was nothing but a carefully orchestrated attack on me, designed to destroy my reputation and silence anyone who dares question his behavior." The video went on for almost 10 minutes, with Isa making wild accusations about my character, motives, and methods. She claimed I'd been stalking her for months, threatening her children when they rode their bikes past my property, and that my security cameras were aimed to spy on her house. "This man is dangerous," she insisted, pointing dramatically at the camera. "He's been planning this setup from the start, manipulating evidence and turning our community against me. I'm not safe in my own home because of his harassment, and neither are any of you." By the end, she was crying again, her voice rising to near hysteria. What made the video especially damaging was that Isa posted it not only to our neighborhood group but to several regional community forums as well. Within hours, it had been shared dozens of times, sparking heated debates online. Some viewers sympathized with Isa, condemning me for bullying a defenseless woman. Others pointed out glaring inconsistencies and questioned her mental stability. The situation was spiraling far beyond our neighborhood drama. It threatened to damage my reputation in the wider community. Before noon, Dean called, his voice tight with concern. "Evan, you need to see what's happening online. Isa's video is gaining traction with people who don't know the full story, And some of them are coming after you hard. There's even talk of a protest at your house. I spent the next hour scrolling through comments and shares, watching strangers debate my character based on ICE's tearful accusations. What frustrated me most was how many sided with her simply because she was crying and claimed to be a victim without asking for any evidence or context. That afternoon, I got another call from dispatch, and 911 complaint this time. Isa claimed I'd been surveilling her property and making threatening gestures whenever she looked my way. She also alleged that the fence repair party had been deliberately loud and disruptive, designed to harass her family and ruin their backyard enjoyment. The dispatcher sounded apologetic, explaining they had to respond to every complaint, even questionable ones. I assured her I'd be home and cooperative when the deputy arrived. Miles showed up an hour later, looking more frustrated than amused. "Boss, this is getting ridiculous," he said as we walked to my fence. "The complainant claims you're intimidating her. But she's the one posting videos about you all over the internet. She also wants us to confiscate your security cameras as evidence of stalking, which won't happen since they're pointed at your own property." We spent another 30 minutes going through the formal interview process, with Miles documenting Isa's claims and my responses. As he finished, Sophie Turner appeared at my front gate, looking agitated and determined. "Officer, I need to make a statement about what's really been happening here," she announced. "Isa Montgomery has been lying about this entire situation, and I have evidence that she's been threatening neighbors who don't support her." Miles looked at me questioningly, and I nodded for Miles to listen to what Sophie had to say. She pulled out her phone and showed him a series of text messages from Isa, threats warning Sophie she'd be fined for various violations if she didn't help spread lies about my behavior. "This woman has been abusing her power as HOA president for months," Sophie said, her voice growing stronger. "She's threatened fines, spread false rumors, and now she's filing fake police reports to try to push someone off their own property. Someone needs to hold her accountable before she destroys this entire community." Miles took photos of the messages and added Sophie's statement to his report, noting a clear pattern of harassment coming from the complainant rather than the accused. That evening, the neighborhood chat group exploded. More residents came forward with stories of Isa's abuse of authority, screenshots of threatening emails, photos of absurd violation notices, and accounts of being bullied into supporting her agenda. Public opinion had completely turned against her. Even former supporters admitted she'd gone too far. Dean posted a comment that summed it up perfectly. "It's time for new leadership in this community. We need someone who represents us, not someone who terrorizes anyone who disagrees." But Isa wasn't done. That night, she made one last desperate move, calling 911 again, this time claiming I was outside her house with a weapon, threatening her family. The call was clearly meant to provoke an armed police response, something that could have ended in someone getting hurt or arrested. Miles called me immediately after getting the dispatch, his voice urgent. "Sheriff, we've got units responding to a weapons call at your place." I told them it's probably false, but they have to treat it seriously. "Stay inside and keep your hands visible when they arrive." I assured him I'd cooperate fully, but inside I was furious that Isa had escalated to potentially deadly false accusations. The response team arrived within minutes. I spent 20 minutes proving I'd been inside all evening, backed by security camera footage confirming my location. The officers were professional but clearly frustrated by the false report. After they cleared the scene, Miles stayed behind to fill me in. "Boss, this is the third false 911 call from the same complainant in 4 days. We're looking at charges of filing false reports, misuse of emergency services, possibly harassment." She's crossed from a neighborhood dispute into criminal behavior. I nodded grimly, realizing my patience had probably prevented a violent escalation, but knowing Isa had just sealed her own fate with her latest lie. Monday morning brought the call I'd been expecting and dreading. Miles contacted me just after 8 a.m. with news that Isa had made yet another 911 call. This time, she claimed I'd vandalized her property during the night and was threatening to burn down her house. "Sheriff, this is completely out of control," Miles said, his voice tight with frustration. "She's called in 4 false reports in 5 days and now she's escalating to arson threats. We need to respond officially, but I think it's time she knows exactly who she's been filing these complaints against." I agreed. The charade had gone on long enough. We arranged to meet at my property within the hour. What Isa didn't know, and what I'd carefully concealed throughout this ordeal, was that her harassment campaign had targeted the very person responsible for investigating her complaints. As county sheriff for the past 8 years, I had built a reputation for fairness, thorough investigations, and zero tolerance for abuse of the law. My deputies respected my leadership, the community trusted my judgment, and I'd never dealt with anyone so determined to destroy themselves as Isa Montgomery. The irony of her situation was about to become crystal clear, and I knew the revelation would destroy whatever credibility she had left. Miles arrived at my ranch in his patrol car, and we walked across the street to Isa's house together. She opened the door immediately, as if waiting for us. Dressed in a business suit, with carefully done makeup and hair, she looked ready for what she probably thought would be my arrest. "Officers, thank you for responding so quickly," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I hope you're finally here to do something about that criminal across the street. He's been terrorizing the neighborhood for weeks, and last night he crossed the line into actual threats." "Ma'am, we're here to investigate your complaint," Miles replied, keeping his professional calm. "But before we proceed, I need to inform you that you've been filing these reports against Sheriff Evan Turner, my supervisor and the elected law enforcement official for this county." The color drained from Isa's face so fast I thought she might faint. Her mouth opened and closed silently several times, and she grabbed the door frame to steady herself. That's impossible," she finally whispered. "He's just a neighbor. He lives on a ranch. He can't be." "I assure you, it's very possible," I said, stepping forward and showing her my badge and ID. "Sheriff Evan Turner, elected to serve this county for 8 years. Every complaint you filed, every 911 call you made, every false accusation you leveled has been against a sworn law enforcement officer. Did you really think I wouldn't investigate who's harassing my neighbors and filing false reports?" Isa's legs gave out completely, and she collapsed into a chair on her porch, staring at my badge as if it were venomous. "This explains so much," Miles added, pulling out his notepad. "Sheriff Turner has been incredibly patient with your behavior, but filing false police reports is a serious crime, especially when you target the very person responsible for investigating them. We've documented 4 separate false 911 calls, multiple harassment complaints with no basis in fact, and evidence of criminal property destruction under your direction." Isa's face turned pale, then green. She looked like she was about to be sick. Isa kept repeating, "I had no idea. This is all a misunderstanding." "Actually, ma'am," Miles interrupted firmly, "ignorance of someone's profession doesn't excuse criminal behavior. Filing false reports is illegal, plain and simple. And targeting a sheriff, that only makes it more serious, not less." I watched Isa's expression shift as the reality hit her the moment she realized her entire campaign hadn't just failed, but had spectacularly backfired. She'd tried to weaponize the law against the very person charged with enforcing it. Now, she was about to face the consequences. "What happens now?" Isa asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Are you going to arrest me?" I paused, carefully weighing my desire for justice against my commitment to fairness. "They depend on you, Isa. You've committed multiple crimes over the past 2 weeks of filing false police reports, conspiracy to commit property destruction, harassment, and misuse of emergency services. I could have you arrested right now, and the district attorney would almost certainly prosecute." I leaned in a little closer. "But I'm willing to offer you an alternative." Her eyes widened, desperate hope flickering as she leaned forward to listen. "You will resign immediately as HOA president. You will issue a public apology to the entire neighborhood for your lies and harassment. You will compensate me for the damage to my fence and the time I've wasted dealing with your false accusations. And finally, you will move out of this neighborhood within 30 days. If you comply fully with these conditions, I will recommend that the district attorney accept a plea agreement for community service instead of jail time." Isa nodded frantically, tears streaming down her face as she realized she was being offered a lifeline she didn't deserve. "And one more thing," I said, pulling out my phone and showing her the latest security footage. This video shows you sneaking around my fence at 2 a.m. last night, trying to cause more damage. You were so focused on your revenge you didn't notice the motion sensors capturing every move. This footage, combined with the others, proves your latest 911 call wasn't just false, it's part of a continuing pattern of criminal harassment. Isa watched herself on the small screen, seeing her desperate attempt to hurt me and finally understanding that her war against my fence was doomed from the start. What happened next unfolded quickly. Within hours, Isa had submitted her resignation to the HOA board and posted a public apology in the neighborhood chat group, admitting she had lied about my fence, orchestrated the vandalism, and filed false police reports. Her apology was brief and clearly written with legal counsel, but it acknowledged the key facts and promised full cooperation with any investigation. By evening, she had written me a check for the fence repairs and put her house on the market. The neighborhood, once torn apart by her lies, began healing, led by Sophie Turner stepping up as interim HOA president, promising the return to reasonable community leadership. As I watched the sun set over my newly repaired fence that evening, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought justice to my little corner of the world. Isa Montgomery had started this fight thinking she could intimidate me into submission, not knowing she was challenging someone with both the authority and patience to let her destroy herself. My fence stood strong and legal, my horses grazed peacefully in their protected pasture, and my community learned a valuable lesson about the difference between leadership and tyranny. Sometimes the best way to deal with a bully is to give them enough rope to hang themselves, especially when you're holding the other end. The fence Isa tried so hard to tear down had become a symbol of justice, and every time I looked at it, I was reminded that the truth always wins in the end. Appreciate you sticking with us at HOA Stories. Hit that bell so you never miss a moment, because things only get crazier from here.